There's a moment in every fading relationship when silence becomes heavier than words. You sit across from someone you once loved beyond reason, and suddenly their presence feels like absence. The conversations that once flowed like rivers now move like stones being pushed uphill. You wonder quietly, how did we get here? Most marriages don't collapse suddenly. They dissolve slowly, invisibly, under the weight of what is never said, what is never confronted, what was always feared. Nietzsche once wrote that love is a state in which man sees things most decidedly as they are not. He believed that most of what we call love is not seeing the other person, but rather seeing our own need reflected in them. And perhaps that sets the forbidden truth that marriage, for all its beauty, often begins not with truth, but with illusion, and ends when that illusion finally dies. But why does this happen so often? Why do two people who once promised eternity become strangers in their own home? Is it the death of passion, the crushing pressure of routine, or is it something deeper? A psychological and spiritual misunderstanding about what love truly demands of us. Nietzsche saw marriage not as a moral duty, but as a spiritual test, one that few were ready for. He warned that the ideal of romantic love, when confused with possession or dependency, corrupts both man and woman. What begins as a union of souls easily becomes a quiet form of enslavement. In this video, we'll explore 6 core insights drawn from Nietzsche, Jung, Kierkegaard, and modern psychology to understand why most marriages collapse and what it truly means to love without illusion. By the end, you may not look at love the same way again, but you might begin to see something far rarer, not the fantasy of forever, but the discipline of becoming worthy of another soul's freedom. It begins with a spark, that electric moment when you meet someone who seems to see you. They laugh at your jokes, share your rhythms, echo your longings. It feels miraculous, almost fated. You tell yourself, I finally found them, the one who understands. But beneath this surge of connection lies something older, deeper, and far more mysterious. Projection. Carl Jung once wrote, "Through projection we live our lives as though surrounded by our own psychic images." What he meant is that for most of us, love begins not with reality, but with reflection. We fall in love not with the other person, but with the part of ourselves we've forgotten or never dared to express. This is why the early phase of love feels divine. It's not merely chemistry, it's revelation. You are encountering the unspoken parts of your own soul, your tenderness, your courage, your longing for beauty, mirrored in another human being. For a time, it feels as though you've come home. But as Nietzsche reminds us, love is the most delicate flower of all illusions. What begins as recognition soon turns into disillusionment, because reality eventually arrives. The person you've idealized starts to act like themselves. Their quirks, insecurities, and differences appear. The reflection fades, and what's left is a real, imperfect human being. And this is where most marriages begin to tremble, because when the illusion dies, so does the comfort of certainty. The fantasy of completion shatters, revealing a truth that can feel unbearable. Love cannot save you from yourself. Nietzsche saw this collapse as a necessary, even sacred, stage of awakening. He believed that genuine love begins only when the projection ends, when two individuals are stripped of illusion and forced to meet in their raw humanity. One must learn to love, he wrote, and that requires discipline. In this sense, love is not a feeling but a training, a spiritual exercise in seeing clearly. To truly love another is to allow their reality to disrupt your fantasy. It's to say, I will no longer use you to escape myself. I will meet you as you are, and in doing so, meet myself more honestly. The death of projection is painful, but it's also the birth of intimacy, because now, finally, there is space for truth. No longer trapped in idealization, you begin to notice the subtle miracle of who this person really is, not perfect, but real. And you too are no longer performing, you're participating. This is where many relationships falter, because it demands a kind of inner courage that few are prepared for. It means letting go of the comforting lie that love will fix you. It means taking responsibility for your own emptiness, your own shadows, your own unfinishedness. Jung would call this withdrawing the projections. It's the process of recognizing that the beauty, wisdom, and power you once saw in your partner were never theirs alone. They were your own qualities, awaiting reclamation. So when your partner disappoints you, ask gently, what part of me was I hoping they would carry for me? When you feel unloved, unlived, unseen, where am I refusing to love or see myself? This is how love becomes real, not through constant passion, but through continual awakening, through the humbling recognition that love was never meant to complete you. It was meant to reveal you. And perhaps this is the quiet revolution Nietzsche hoped for, a form of love strong enough to survive disillusionment, wise enough to embrace imperfection, and brave enough to see the other not as a mirror, but as a mystery. Because when love loses its illusion and still chooses to remain, that's when it finally becomes true. Have you ever wondered why you keep ending up with the same kind of person, just wearing a different face, different names, different stories, but the same emotional patterns, the same coldness, the same chaos, the same quiet ache? It's as if life keeps leading you back to the same classroom until you finally learn the lesson. Carl Jung had a haunting way of describing this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. We like to believe that we choose our partners rationally, guided by chemistry, values, or shared dreams. But in truth, much of what draws us to another person is not choice. It's compulsion. It is the invisible pull of what Jung called the shadow, all the rejected, unhealed, and forgotten parts of ourselves that still hunger for recognition. Our shadow is not just darkness, it is our disowned vitality, the emotions we were never allowed to express, the traits we were taught to suppress. If you grew up needing to be the responsible one, you might unconsciously seek someone impulsive, someone who lives the freedom you were never allowed. If you were ignored, you might chase intensity, mistaking volatility for love. We think we're falling in love, but often we're falling into our unfinished story. In this way, relationships become mirrors of the psyche. Your partner's flaws are often reflections of your own inner wounds. The controlling partner reveals your fear of chaos. The distant lover awakens your terror of abandonment. And so, without realizing it, two people enter into an ancient dance, each one unconsciously inviting the other to heal what was left undone. This is why marriage is not merely romantic. It's alchemical. It brings together two unfinished souls and forces them to confront the raw material of their humanity. Every argument, every disappointment, every misunderstanding is not a sign of failure. It's a message. It's the shadow saying, "Look here, You still have something to learn. Nietzsche warned of this too, though in his own way. He wrote that the one who despises himself still respects himself as one who despises. In other words, even our self-hatred becomes a strange form of identity. We hold on to our pain because it gives us a sense of self, and until that pattern is recognized, we will unconsciously seek relationships that confirm it. This is why some people can only love those who hurt them. It's not that they want pain, it's that pain feels familiar, and familiarity to the wounded psyche feels like safety. Healing, then, begins when we dare to break that cycle, when we stop demanding that others carry the burden of our unlived life. This is what Jung called shadow integration. The moment you turn inward and say, I will no longer make another person responsible for what I have refused to face. This shift transforms everything, because once you see your partner not as the cause of your suffering, but as the mirror of your unfinished healing, the dynamic changes from blame to awareness. You begin to ask different questions. What is this conflict trying to reveal about me? What fear in me is being touched by their behavior? What part of myself have I exiled and am now meeting through them? When we approach love this way, the purpose of marriage itself changes. It's no longer about finding someone who makes us happy. It's about growing alongside someone who makes us whole. And that kind of love demands courage, because it requires that we see our wounds not as shameful, but as sacred. They are the openings through which love, real love, can enter. So perhaps the question is not, how do I find the right person, but rather, how do I become conscious enough to meet whoever I love with clarity, not projection, not fear, not the past, but presence? Because every relationship, at its deepest level, is an invitation to stop repeating the wound and begin transforming it. If this resonates with you, if you sense the truth in these quiet, difficult places, consider subscribing. Each week we explore the psychology and philosophy behind the patterns that shape our lives, so that awareness can begin to turn suffering into strength. Every love story begins with closeness. Two people drawn together by the gravity of longing, eager to merge, to belong, to dissolve the space between them. In those early days, separation feels unbearable. You text constantly, share every thought, imagine a life where distance no longer exists. But in time, something strange begins to happen. The same intimacy that once felt liberating begins to feel heavy. The same presence that once thrilled you begins to suffocate you. You start craving air, solitude, silence, and yet you feel guilty for wanting it. We've been taught to equate love with fusion, to believe that two people become one. But what if that very belief is what kills love in the long run? Friedrich Nietzsche warned that the highest form of love must preserve individuality. Love, he wrote, is not consolation, it is light. True love does not blur the boundaries between two souls. It illuminates them. It does not absorb the other, but allows both to stand freely in their fullness. Kierkegaard, too, understood this paradox. He believed that authentic love must always exist alongside freedom, that the moment love becomes duty, it loses its sacredness. To love another is to love them in freedom, he wrote, to will their freedom even when it costs you your own comfort. To meditates and at sage and see. But this is precisely where so many marriages falter. Out of fear of loss, we begin to control. Out of insecurity, we begin to demand proof. We start monitoring, managing, shaping the other person until they are no longer free to be who they are. And the tragedy is this: the more control we exert in the name of love, the less love remains. The paradox of love is that it thrives only where freedom exists. Like a flame, it needs both closeness and air. Smother it, and it dies. Neglect it, and it fades. The art of lasting intimacy lies in learning how to hold and release, how to belong without possessing. In psychological terms, this is the shift from dependency to interdependence. In dependency, we seek security through control. If I can keep you close, I still feel safe. In interdependence, we find security in trust. Even if you walk your own path, I know you would roam through freely. Nietzsche often criticized romantic relationships that disguised fear as devotion. He believed most people did not love, they merely wanted to own. The lover, he wrote, seeks what is good for himself, not what is good for the beloved. His challenge to us was radical: to love another not for how they complete us, but for who they become through us. Imagine what marriage would look like if both partners lived by this principle. If love were not about keeping someone small enough to stay, but creating a space vast enough for both to grow. Freedom within love is not distance, it is respect. It means allowing your partner to have thoughts that unsettle you, interests that exclude you, dreams that don't revolve around you. It means resisting the temptation to make them an extension of your own ego, because the moment we try to define the other, we begin to erase them. Kierkegaard saw this as the ultimate test of love: to stand in the presence of another's freedom and not feel diminished by it, to see their difference not as a threat, but as a mystery worth honoring. In a world where so many relationships are built on possession, such love is revolutionary. It requires the courage to say, I choose you, not because I need you, but because I see you. And that is the kind of love that survives, because it's not built on control, but on trust, not on illusion, but on reverence. So if love has begun to feel like a cage, remember this: freedom is not the enemy of love. It is the oxygen that keeps it alive. Every love begins with hunger. That first look, that first spark, it awakens something primal and electric within us. You can't stop thinking about them. Every message feels urgent. Every touch feels like discovery. You are alive again. But then, time passes. The unknown becomes known. The mystery becomes routine. The wild, thrilling chaos of early love softens into familiarity. You still care deeply, perhaps more than ever, but something feels missing. Desire begins to fade, and that is one of the cruelest paradoxes of marriage. The very stability we crave, the security, the comfort, the predictability, often kills the very passion that created the bond in the first place. Arthur Schopenhauer had a bleak but piercing view of this. He believed that desire is born of lack. It exists only where there is tension, distance, and pursuit. Once the desire is fulfilled, he argued, the tension dissolves and the passion dies. The will to life, as he called it, drives us toward union, but once we have attained it, that same will turns restless again, searching for new stimulation, new obstacles. It sounds cynical, but Schopenhauer was naming a truth that modern psychology later confirmed: desire does not thrive in safety. It thrives in mystery. The French psychotherapist Esther Perel has echoed this insight for our time. Love enjoys knowing everything about you. Desire needs mystery. Love wants closeness. Desire needs space. In other words, passion and comfort are not enemies, but they live by different laws. Love seeks to possess, desire longs to reach. Love thrives on familiarity, desire thrives on distance. When we collapse all distance in the name of intimacy, we unknowingly suffocate the erotic spark. Nietzsche would have agreed. He saw passion as the fire of becoming, the vital tension between what is and what could be. When a relationship becomes too certain, too stable, it begins to stagnate. No artist tolerates reality, he wrote, and in this sense, love itself is an art that demands continual renewal. So what does this mean for marriage? Must passion inevitably die? Not necessarily, but it must evolve. Desire in its immature form feeds on novelty, on what is new, forbidden, or unattainable, but mature desire feeds on mystery within the familiar. It's not about finding a new partner, but rediscovering the old one through new eyes. It's about cultivating curiosity, even after you think you know everything. Ask yourself, when was the last time you looked at your partner, not as someone predictable, but as someone still unfolding? When was the last time you saw them through the lens of wonder, not habit? To sustain desire, we must resist the temptation to domesticate the soul. Comfort is beautiful, but too much comfort breeds numbness. A life without challenge becomes a slow erosion of aliveness. This is why the healthiest marriages are not those without conflict, but those with shared evolution, where both people keep growing, learning, risking. Passion is not lost when the flame burns low. It's lost when both stop feeding it with new experiences, new perspectives, and new acts of imagination. Psychologically, this means that the erotic is less about the body and more about vitality. We desire in others what we have forgotten in ourselves: their courage, their independence, their untamed energy. When both partners nurture their individuality, their own projects, their own creativity, desire finds something to admire again. Because admiration, not possession, is what keeps passion alive. So if love has grown quiet, perhaps it's not dying. Perhaps it's inviting you to awaken, to reintroduce distance where routine has dulled the edge, to allow a little mystery back into the everyday. In the end, marriage is not the end of desire, it's the test of it. It asks, can you keep discovering the person you think you already know? Desire doesn't disappear. It waits for wonder to return. We grow up believing in a story that somewhere out there is the one, the perfect person who will finally make everything make sense. They'll understand you without words, love you without condition, heal every wound without even trying. It's a beautiful dream and a dangerous one, because beneath that dream lies a deeper illusion, the belief that love is found, not built. Plato, in his Symposium, offered the myth that still haunts modern love, that humans were once whole beings, split apart by the gods, and that every person spends their life searching for their lost half. It's a poetic image, but it's also the origin of an impossible expectation that another person can restore our sense of completeness. This idea may comfort us when we're lonely, but in practice, it sets us up for perpetual disappointment, because the moment we believe someone is the one, we stop seeing them clearly. We project perfection onto them. We edit their flaws, dismiss their humanity, and turn them into an idol of our longing. And idols always crack. Sooner or later, the person we idealized fails to live up to our fantasy. They become impatient, distracted, moody, human, and instead of accepting that reality, we feel betrayed. We say things like, "You've changed," when in truth, they've only revealed themselves. This is where Nietzsche's insight becomes piercing. He wrote that love of the ideal is cowardice. It avoids what is real. To love the idea of someone is easy. To love their complexity, their contradictions, their darkness, their imperfection, that requires courage. Modern psychology agrees. Idealization is not love, it's defense. It shields us from the discomfort of uncertainty. We romanticize perfection to avoid the risk of true intimacy, because to love someone real is to face the parts of them that challenge us, frustrate us, even mirror the flaws we fear in ourselves. When we demand perfection, we don't want a partner, we want a reflection. But connection begins where idealization ends. It begins the moment you allow the other person to be imperfect and still choose to stay curious. When you stop asking, "Are they the right person?" and start asking, "Am I ready to love what is real?" In many marriages, the myth of the right person becomes a quiet poison. One partner begins to compare the other to an invisible standard, the version of them that exists only in the mind. They stop listening to who their partner is and start resenting who they aren't. Slowly, love turns into disappointment, and disappointment into contempt. The antidote is humility, the willingness to meet reality as it is. Kierkegaard said, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you can never have." We suffer not because love fails us, but because reality refuses to match our imagination. To love maturely is to surrender that fantasy. It's to understand that no one will ever be everything, and that's precisely what makes love sacred. It is finite, fragile, and chosen. You stop searching for the one the moment you realize that every person you meet is both right and wrong for you, that every relationship is a mix of joy and difficulty, of alignment and friction. Love is not about avoiding that friction, but learning to transform it. Nietzsche would call this the courage to affirm life, to say yes not only to what is beautiful, but to what is flawed, fleeting, and incomplete. So when you catch yourself wondering if you chose the wrong person, ask instead, "Am I willing to see them without the mask of my ideals? Can I meet them, not as my fantasy, but as my equal in imperfection?" Because the moment you can say yes to that, that's when love finally becomes real. In the modern world, we think of marriage as a partnership, a practical arrangement built on mutual support, shared goals, and emotional companionship. But for most of human history, marriage was never meant to make you happy. It was meant to make you grow. Nietzsche, in his usual uncompromising way, once said, "It is not a lack of love, but a lack of friendship that makes unhappy marriages." Yet beneath that observation lies a deeper challenge, that marriage, when entered consciously, is not simply about companionship. It is a discipline of becoming, to live day after day beside another human being, to witness their fears, their habits, their beauty, and their chaos, is to confront the infinite complexity of existence itself. Every relationship becomes a mirror that exposes not only who your partner is, but who you are when you stop pretending. Carl Jung saw this as the very heart of individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious into consciousness. Marriage, he wrote, is the ordeal by fire through which the transformation of the personality takes place. It's not the romance that changes you, It's the friction, the challenge, the mirror of another soul that refuses to let you hide. We tend to romanticize marriage as the end of a journey, the moment of arrival, but perhaps it is only the beginning of the true work, because to love another person deeply is to be constantly confronted by your own limits, your impatience, your pride, your hidden fears. Every conflict becomes an invitation to evolve or to retreat into blame. And this is where most marriages quietly fail, not because people stop loving each other, but because they stop using the relationship as a means of awakening. They choose comfort over truth, familiarity over growth. They forget that marriage was never supposed to be easy. It was supposed to be transformative. Nietzsche's notion of self-overcoming, the ability to transcend one's own limitations, is the perfect metaphor here. A conscious marriage is not a sanctuary from difficulty. It is a forge. Within it, two people agree not to preserve their egos, but to refine them. This doesn't mean endless conflict or suffering. It means a shared commitment to evolution, to hold one another accountable, not just for kindness, but for growth. It means asking, not how can you make me happy, but how can we help each other become more whole, more awake, more alive. Such a relationship is not built on the fragile ground of romance alone. It is rooted in shared meaning, in the recognition that love is not just an emotion, but a practice, a daily act of patience, forgiveness, curiosity, and renewal. Psychologically, this reframes marriage from an external contract to an internal covenant. It's not about the ceremony, the vows, or even the promise of forever. It's about the inner vow, the choice to grow through the presence of another soul. In this light, even the challenges take on a sacred dimension. The arguments, the misunderstandings, the moments of distance, they are not signs of failure, but opportunities for awakening. They force us to see where we are still clinging to control, still afraid to be seen, still resisting change. Jung believed that the soul seeks wholeness, and it often chooses relationships as the arena where that wholeness can be tested and expanded. Marriage, then, is not the opposite of freedom. It is its training ground, because to love someone truly, to see them, to stay, to grow with them, is to practice freedom from the ego's need to win, to possess, to be right. It is to choose transformation over repetition. In that sense, the purpose of marriage is not to find happiness, but to become capable of it. When seen this way, marriage is no longer a social expectation, but a spiritual discipline, the most intimate form of philosophical practice there is. Two people, standing side by side, daring to ask, can we love in a way that awakens rather than comforts? Can we become through each other more whole? If the answer is yes, then even the difficult days become holy. The forbidden truth Nietzsche saw, and that most of us still refuse to see, is this: marriage is not meant to make you happy. It is meant to make you conscious. We live in a culture obsessed with comfort, with the idea that love should be easy, that the right person will complete us, that happiness is a permanent state once we find the one. But Nietzsche and Jung both understood that real love, like real life, is not built on ease. It's built on truth, and truth is often uncomfortable. To love someone over time is to be stripped of illusion. You learn that beauty fades, that desire waxes and wanes, that your partner is not your mirror image, but another mystery, full of their own darkness, their own fears, their own longing to be seen. In that crucible, the ego resists. It wants control, admiration, certainty, but marriage offers none of these. It offers instead a mirror, one that reflects not who you wish to be, but who you are. And that is the secret reason so many flee from it. Because when the illusions die, when the romance wears thin, when your partner becomes not an idea, but a human being, that's when the real work begins. And this is where Nietzsche's and Jung's paths meet in the demand for self-overcoming. Nietzsche called upon us to become who we are. Jung called upon us to integrate what we deny. Marriage, when lived consciously, demands both. It is the meeting point between love and philosophy, between eros and awakening. To remain in such a union requires courage, the courage to see your own shadow, to face the pain your partner reflects, and to love them through the constant transformation of time. It requires that you stop seeking security and start seeking truth. The forbidden part of Nietzsche's insight lies in this reversal. Society teaches us that the goal of marriage is happiness, but the goal of marriage, in its highest form, is transcendence. Happiness, when it comes, is a byproduct, a quiet radiance that emerges when two people have faced their darkness and chosen to stay awake. It is not the product of compatibility, but of consciousness. Carl Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Transformation, not comfort, is the true sign of love. And perhaps that's why so many marriages fail in the modern age, because people enter them seeking relief from loneliness, not confrontation with truth. They want safety, not self-discovery. But the marriage that endures, that evolves, is the one where both partners understand that they are entering not a fairy tale, but a furnace, one that burns away illusion and purifies what is real. The man or woman who doesn't need marriage is not anti-love. They simply refuse to enter it blindly. They understand that marriage is not salvation, but initiation, a path to self-knowledge. And that's what makes such people dangerous to society. They cannot be controlled through fear, guilt, or convention. They choose love, not because they must, but because they can. When Nietzsche said that marriage should be a long conversation, he didn't mean endless agreement. He meant a dialogue that evolves, deepens, and renews itself through shared struggle. A marriage that is alive is one where both people are free to grow, to fail, to rediscover themselves again and again. So what is the forbidden truth? That love, in its highest form, is not a feeling, it's a form of awakening. That the purpose of marriage is not to satisfy the ego, but to dissolve it. That true partnership is not possession, but participation in each other's becoming. When you understand this, you no longer fear marriage, nor do you idolize it. You see it for what it truly is, a mirror, a teacher, a sacred practice. And then, whether you choose to marry or not, you are free. Free to love without illusion. Free to walk beside another soul without losing yourself. Free to embrace the full intensity of being human, with all its pain, beauty, and impermanence. That, Nietzsche would say, is the highest form of love, not one that makes life easier, but one that makes life deeper.